Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fall STEM Extravaganza. I have been looking forward to this panel all week. You know, I love panels, I love STEM, I love talking to these fabulous people, and I love talking about saving time and money because you can never save too much of either one, right? Before I have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, I want to remind everybody that our Fall STEM Extravaganza is going on all this week. This link will take you to the main page. I'm going to actually show you really quickly what that looks like because I wanted to make sure that you know where to click through for everything, and then we will get started. So this bonus bundle, all of these resources are in there. You just got to click on that green button and sign up. If you're looking for today's dollar deals that will go through midnight or just about midnight Eastern time tonight, you can click through here, and the next 2 days sales are there as well. And that's mainly the thing. Oh, also make sure you catch tomorrow's panel with Dr. Yen Verhoeven, who's here today. She'll be hosting tomorrow. And all the details are there on that site. So I'm going to take this out right now. I'm going to take this banner out so we can see everybody beautiful. I want it to be like that so we can see people a little bit better. Okay, so before we dive into our questions, and those of you who are watching live, please feel free to continue to include more questions in our comment section. I will be monitoring the feed as we go. And so kicking it off, Dr. Yen, please give us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, where do I start? I have taught over 20 years from kindergarten all the way to people I don't dare ask what their ages are. All kinds of STEM. My passion is really to change education by helping teachers figure out different methodologies and techniques to make teaching easier for them and more engaging for their students. And I guess I should tell everybody I'm also a learning theorist. So if I go off the deep end with theory, it's not, it's me. So it's great to be here.
Well, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Chanel, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hello. My name is Chanel Johnson. DC STEMtastic on Twitter, and I like to go by the STEMinist because I believe STEM is for all, especially the girls. So a little bit about me. I am a math and science educator. I mostly taught middle school. I am now a science specialist where I support K-12 science. At one point I supported K-12 math and science, but now I am mostly supporting science and I love it.
So do we. You're in the right place. Claire.
Hi guys, I am Claire. I am part of Vivify STEM. I am a STEM educator from pre-K all the way through 7th grade. And I have my own STEM class, which is amazing. And I actually have a background in aerospace engineering, and I took the jump about 6 years ago into full-time education. And I am so passionate about getting everybody involved in all the things that STEM has to offer, much like everybody else here.
We're among friends. Renee?
All right. Well, I'm Renee from the Science Schoolyard, and I've been teaching. This is my 31st year. I have, in the last 13 years, I've been a K-5 science teacher. But the week before school started, they moved us around again, and we were constantly changing schools. So I decided that I needed to stay out at my country school. And I was given an opportunity to teach half-time 3rd grade. So I'm in a 3rd grade classroom in the morning. I actually am the other half of the principal because it's such a small school. He's the afternoon teacher, as he is the principal in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I'm super excited. I get to be a GT STEM teacher. So I get to be able to tie in science and technology and engineering. I am so excited about it because they have let me just be able to do whatever I want to do to get kids excited about learning STEM. So I'm all in.
Fantastic. So I thought the first thing that we would do is actually start off with a lightning round. Now we have the whole hour together. We're going to take deeper dives into this topic as we go, but I just love one quick tip that will either save us time or money when it comes to STEM. And I am going to start with Chanel, but 1 second. Some of us are getting feedback, it looks like. So if we can all mute when we're not talking, that'll help with that. So thank you so much for letting us know. Facebook user, whoever you are. We appreciate that so much. Okay, Chanel, one quick tip to save time or money.
One good tip is to plan ahead.
Now I'm going to have to remember to unmute. Dr. Yen, quick tip for saving time or money.
Get your kids involved in the teaching, in the cleanup, in the prep.
Love it. Claire?
Ooh, I was going to say give your kids jobs. So Dr. Yin got that one. So I guess my other one would be is give students a budget for their STEM supplies that they're using for each challenge.
Love that. And Renee?
Unmute. I actually love making sure I have tubs set for each of the tables. So everything that they need is in there. If it's an opportunity for them to grab out of there to get individual supplies, it's just saved a ton of time to be able to just come in and make sure, especially when I'm getting different groups in very quickly in and out. Tubbing activities or the STEM supplies helps a lot.
Thank you. I actually have a question, Renee, that I'm going to start with you because I know that you've done the sort of elective teaching of STEM. So we had a pre-submitted question. It was actually on a different panel and I thought I had printed it and I didn't. So I'm going to go from memory. But the question was around somebody has to order their consumables at the beginning of the year. And they were feeling like, how do you do that? Like, so you said you had to as well?
We actually do summertime and then we get everything delivered like the first week of school. And I'm still now, because I have a new position, I am ordering things now. So basically I create a roadmap as to what I would like to do as I go through the school year. I've started my roadmap for my new job. And what I do right now is I made a big long list of things that I believe I would need. And then I actually at some point go to the dollar store and get some of my own supplies. And I actually, another thing that I do is I've gotten a whole bunch of tubs now because I'm in new schools and just start putting the things that I can from recyclables in there. So I don't always have to buy everything, but making sure that we have a list of things that can be purchased at different stores. Sometimes we have to go through Amazon to get some of those supplies. Sometimes we do a Walmart run. Sometimes we do the dollar store run and we go and we get all of those things. And so it's a one big trip. And then we divide that out. But it's a lot of like, what do I need for this activity? But I always make sure I have extra masking tape and we always make sure we have extra pipe cleaners and we make sure we have extra, if we do Play-Doh, we have a list already compiled as to all those little things that we would need on the spot, like paper clips and, and sticks and things like that. But have a list and go right down the list and know where you can find it the cheapest. Staples is another one that we go through quite a bit.
Do you, how many students did you have when you were?
499 the last day that I left. I had 499 students with 25 sections of science. So every week.
God bless you. Yeah, I mean, just trying to figure out the amount of materials you need. I imagine that's something you probably just kind of get better with over.
I hoard materials too from year to year. So I might have 10 boxes of paper clips. If you're going to buy me those supplies out of the budget, I'm going to make sure that I cushion it because I don't always know what I want to do. And I might change my idea or I might need some more. So I cushion the things that I need the most. And that's how we've been able to get by. Staples can be ordered in 2 days. So if you do need something for the next week, Staples is really good at you order it and it's there within 2 days.
Yeah, I think I mean, like when I was listening to you and kind of thinking, I never had a cycle like that. So I didn't have that many kids I had to buy for. But I think like when I was listening to what you would like to have on hand, it sounds to me like you have a lot of materials that are malleable, like Play-Doh and pipe cleaners. And then you have some rigid materials like craft sticks.
Yes.
And if you don't know exactly what your whole year plan looks like right now, and that's like overwhelming because what isn't in this moment, that's what I would say is just go for like the things that can be used in many different ways for many different projects.
Toilet paper tubes are free. Egg cartons are free. We talk about something that's like cheap, cardboard boxes cut up. If you can substitute something for it, we do a lot of substitutions too. And we put everything in like shoe boxes or in plastic tubs because you want to be able to pull something real quickly for time management as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on material stuff before we move on?
Yes, actually, one thing that I started doing this year that's been a game changer is I went to the other teachers and said, hey, we go through a lot of masking tape and craft sticks. Can you put those on your supply list? So then every student brought me a roll of masking tape because it was on their supply list. And so now I'm so thankful because I don't have to spend all that money. So I think that's also one way to get to fill up your maker space without unloading your wallet.
Love that. One of the other things that I would do with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Yen about some ways to partner with community or grants, or because I know you have a lot of experience doing that. Before I jump over to you, I want to give you a second to think about it. I was just going to say one of the other things that I would do too, but this was when I was a regular classroom teacher, so it doesn't apply as much to an elective teacher. I would just set up an Amazon wish list. And I would just make sure parents knew about it. And when we get close to the holidays, like I would just say like, hey, sometimes parents want to buy stuff, as gifts, but I don't need any gifts. But I think our class does though. So if they want to, no pressure at all. And you go to Dollar Tree, pipe cleaners. And if you want to check out this Amazon wish list, we have I would put a bunch of STEM stuff in there. And, usually because kids love STEM and love STEM challenges and all those kinds of things that you're doing, we'd get a fair amount from that too. So Dr. Yan, I'm going to throw it over to you and just ask, what are some ways that you could recommend to our teachers that they use the community partners or grants in order to make sure they don't have to, break into their own personal budgets? Because we need to do our best to stop doing that as much as possible. I'd love for that not to be the norm.
Totally agree. And actually, you know me, you put me here and I'm a little bit radical. So my radical intention right now is teachers should not have to pay out of their pocket. I'm going to give you another piece of advice that I learned early on when I inherited a biotech program that was burning about $20,000 a year. And that's this: you blow your budget because you go back to the district and you say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I need the money for it. So a little bit of radical advice. It's always worked for me. What I suggest when you're going out for community partnerships, when you're thinking about your ultimate STEAM program, is think about what is the impact that's going to happen with your kids. What are the projects that you want them to do, and what are the benefits? I invite you to just spend a few minutes to brainstorm those things, because that's exactly how you bring this to your communities. So, oftentimes when we do a big lab experiment or something like that, and I needed supplies, I would send home a little sheet, to let my families know that students would be doing this. Here's what they're going to be learning from it. And we could really use these things. And I tell you, within a couple days, I would have baking soda and vinegar in places that I, was storing them everywhere because people were bringing things in. The whole point is you need a purpose. If you have a purpose, and I know all teachers do, right? And you're telling people exactly what you want to do with those things. It's very easy to get businesses and communities on board. There is, for teachers, it's almost and this is a sort of radical idea, but it actually works, is it actually takes less time to go to the hardware store and ask for $200 worth of supplies than it is for you to scrape and scrounge and beg. And I remember even talking to a business partner of mine, and she's like, yeah, I have my cousin, and she wrote on Facebook and she just asked everybody for $1 so that she could do this project. And I was like, how much was the project total? She's like, $200. I'm like, why didn't you just ask for $200 from a business? And here, my business partner is like, you're right. I'm going to just write her a check for $200 and have it written off on my taxes. Right? 50 people or one business. So in terms of time, you may not be used to going to these community partnerships, but the other perspective that I want to share, and Carrie, stop me whenever you want to, you just got me on a roll here. But when it comes to businesses, they want good press and they want communities to know them. So what better than when it shows up on the front page of your local paper that Walmart just donated, 500 scissors to the STEM program, right? Or, your local, like we have John Deere just donated lab jackets, by the way, which I did get, lab jackets that had John Deere on them. Now, not here, but I'm talking about like when I did my biotech program, I had Genentech do the same thing, donated lab jackets to all the kids, and you can invite them to put the logos on them, right? So, one thing I suggest is think about it as an adopt a teacher. Sending out a letter to some of these local businesses and saying, hey, would you be interested in adopting me, in adopting my classroom? And in doing so, I shall evangelize your company. And go ahead, Carrie.
I was going to ask, so do you do, I'm just thinking, as I never did that, like not once. Although I did have, my dad used to teach, oh God, it just dropped my mind. Project achievement. Oh, I don't remember. Okay. So they used to bring business members into the classroom and they would teach like a lesson like once a week.
Junior achievement.
Thank you.
Yes.
And he would go into like and do that once a week. And every single time he did it, he would go to the grocery store, talk to a manager, and they would give them bags of candy.
Yes.
He would like give candy out to, and it just stunned me like as like, a teenager, just like the grocery store's just going to give you candy because you want it. I mean, like that's what they're supposed to sell the candy. I couldn't believe that. But so when I'm talking about like evangelizing or whatever, I'm trying to think of easy ways to do it so you don't add too much workload. But I'm thinking like even if you have a class website.
Exactly. It's not even
newsletter.
A big thing. Exactly. And just it could even be like you could even ask your principal to say in the newsletter, hey, can you just say a blurb to, thanks so-and-so for donating to, this first grade class, right? It's just a little mention, but for businesses, it's actually a big advantage. Sometimes it's stuff that they don't use. Sometimes it's a tax write-off. Sometimes it's just something to share with the community. Now, universities will do the same. Your local colleges, your local universities, you can write out to these professors because professors, in order to get tenure, have to have community service. So what better community service than to talk to kids or to do a STEM experiment or to even donate Petri plates and things like that, right? The idea is it's almost like a mind shift. Rather than you having to go out and buy those things out of your pocket, it's actually better to get community members and business members on board. But not only that, they also give you recognition. And just an FYI, when I was a high school teacher, just for the heck of it, I wrote letters to Genentech and they adopted me. $10,000 my first year to start a tissue culture program. Okay. Later on, when I was a biotech program chair, of course, this was out of college, but I was like, I need equipment. And it turns out the local biotech companies that were in Maryland had surplus. So we had a $75,000 centrifuge that was delivered to us.
That's
you
cool.
Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. It's just a matter of and God only knows, trying to find the time to like embark on something new can feel a little bit overwhelming, but maybe just start with something small. Start with your Home Depot, start with your Dollar Tree, and then as you build up.
Yep. Ask for the manager and say, hey, do you have any wood and cardboard scraps? That's it. Or save them for me, right? Yeah. Absolutely. These businesses really want to help. And, when you come in there, you're giving them a reason to. The other thing I would also share too, just one more thing and then I'll stop, is make sure you're publicizing the work that you're doing. Take pictures if you can, blur out the faces if you're not allowed to do that, but take pictures, do reports, send out newsletters. But call your local paper if you're doing something really exciting. Okay, I remember we used to launch bottle rockets and they would always have the paper there to do it. And your kids love that, right? Like they're on TV. Mm-hmm. The reason why I actually got my program fully funded and my principal left me alone was when we made the front page. So
it has lots of knock-on like effects that are positive. Love that. Yes. All right, I'm gonna tie this one up for right now, but we can come back to it if there's something that you want to add to it. At the end, I always ask the same question at the end. So Claire, I'm going to start this next one with you. This one was pre-submitted to us from Kim. She is an elementary STEM teacher in Connecticut. And she wrote, in a 45-minute period, only once a week, I'm having a hard time teaching the engineering is elementary units because they take 2 months or more per unit. That's too long for the younger elementary students. Is there some curriculum for elementary that I can find which addresses engineering or a scope and sequence with lessons?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one that's asked a lot, because when you have short time periods, what we're talking about is, can you do meaningful STEM? How do you do that? What does that look like? We actually have a whole scope and sequence and curriculum lined out for K through 8 on our Vivify website. But I think the main thing is to really define what it is that you're trying to get out of a STEM program, and even meet with your principal, because that's ultimately who's going to decide if it's worth it or not, or if what you're doing is meaningful. And then start to back up from there and say, well, are we trying to meet a certain standard? Is it going to take a whole month to do that? It shouldn't. And what is it that you're trying to accomplish per class period? If it's taking you a month to get through a unit that's teaching like 2 standards, that's not what STEM is about. STEM is about teaching that problem solving, the critical thinking. If you're trying to focus on the doing, you're missing out on the thinking. And that's what the point of STEM is.
I almost want to unscrew my mic and drop it for you on your behalf. I actually want
I don't think any of us are going to be able to. I mean, that was awesome. That was such a good answer, Claire. I'm so impressed.
Okay, so I actually kind of want to hear from everybody on this. So, like, the name of this panel was Quality STEM, Unlimited Time and Money. And so, before we get into some of the practical ideas of what you can do with those short class periods, because 45 minutes is even more than some of the people who are watching this. A lot of people have 30. I hear 30 minutes quite a bit. And I do want to give them practical ideas. But before we even get into that, I would like to know what everybody here, and I'll actually start with Claire because you started it, and then we'll keep going. What does quality STEM look like, or what does it mean to you? When we say quality STEM, what does that actually mean, Claire?
To me, that means that when my students graduate from my classroom or from whatever school I'm teaching in, that they can go into the world and say, oh, I know how to solve these problems. Because that's the goal of education, right? I don't want them to get out and say, oh, I know how to make a roller coaster out of toilet paper tubes. Like, what is that going to do for you, So even if you have 15 minutes, I don't think you can build a whole STEM program on 15-minute class periods, but I do think that they can gain so much from building those teamwork skills, learning how to communicate, doing simple like the tower, classic tower challenges, just where they're communicating and collaborating, the 4 C's, 21st century skills. That is the focus, and what I would say is the big takeaway when you're saying, what is quality STEM?
All right, Renee, would you add anything to that? What does quality STEM look like to you or mean to you?
It was really, really quick turnaround. I've been starting, this is our 3rd week. And I had to come up with a program. It was like, here you go. You get whatever you want to do it. And I had to start with, like you said, Claire, a scope and sequence. What do I want to be able to accomplish with the standards? I have to hit those standards, but I also know how important it is for them to be critically thinking, to be able to have positive growth mindset, to be able to, when there's a problem with what the outcome was, to learn how to modify, be able to actually share what they made, and be able to have a conversation. So those are components that I always want to make sure I'm teaching, but I also know that in any program, what you can do is using those, like you said, Claire, using the engineering design process, and then ultimately fitting in an activity. It can be anything that fits that ticket. So I would never take a unit and stretch it out for 4 to 5 weeks, just because I think for us, something that we can do quite quickly in 45 minutes where we can learn that standard or have that challenge be done, and then move on to something else. I know, like Claire, I know you've done, as well as I have, like a space unit. So maybe the first week is, you're learning about, creating, what it would be like to live in space. So I tie in that science component, and then you add that engineering. So, it's not just about engineering. Maybe at 1 week you're doing, something about, the atmosphere, and then you're building something. But we're kind of meshing it all together. Maybe the next week you're using, coding or technology. So it's what are you trying to do with the time that you have? And maybe it's a theme. I'm doing a lot of project-based learning projects right now that focus on STEM, because that's what I have to do. I have to start melding it all together with the concepts that I have to teach.
Fantastic. Chanel, what does quality STEM mean or look like to you?
Absolutely. First, quality STEM is not something that's packaged. It's not something that is purchased. It should be authentic. So what is STEM for me may look like something totally different to everybody that's on the call. But essentially, you are using the practices, the skills of STEM to solve a problem and improve practices. Ways that I've seen STEM in my community is used in ways of how can we use these skills to make the world a better place? How can we make our community better? For example, we have we have communities that live in food deserts, which means they don't have access to fresh food, fruits and vegetables. They have access to what's at the convenience store, which is junk food. So how can we stop childhood obesity? How can we make our community better? We're going to start a garden. I have some schools that actually they have chickens and eggs, but everything is with a purpose. It's to solve a problem. It's to let students see in the moment, who am I? I'm just an 8-year-old kid, but I am making my community better based on the skills that was given to me. Think about the ownership they'll have. And another thing I want to add about STEM should not be separated from science and math. Oftentimes when I hear STEM, it's something totally different than what's going on in science. In science, you have cross-cutting concepts, which tells you how to think, which tells you cause and effect. That goes into STEM as well. You have your science and engineering practices, analyze data, construct an explanation, bring those concepts together, talk to your science teachers, talk to your math teachers. They don't have to be separate. And unfortunately, I'm starting to see more and more of it. Oh, we have STEM class. Oh, and we also have science. They don't talk to each other. So we're seeing it, and we're trying our best to make sure that everyone sees it's all connected. How can I make my community better? How can I improve my community? And making sure that we are working together. That to me is what quality STEM is.
Can I piggyback off of that? It's very interesting because as a science teacher and melding STEM together, that's what I was doing for 13 years. It's like right now I have to try to figure out how to continue to do that now that I'm not the science teacher. But what I would be considered is one component of their win time. So I'm the extension, the enrichment. So I have to take what they are doing in science and math, and I have to figure out how to put that all together, because I don't want it disjointed. I have to make sure that it works and scaffolds with what they're already doing to make sure that it's above and beyond. And oftentimes it's all segmented, like you said, and it can all go together. So yeah, start working on exactly what you said, Chanel, is like put it together. Like it's like a puzzle. They all fit together so nicely.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dr. Yan, you're up.
Oh man, how do I top that? I can't, because I'm just going to build on it. I love it. When we approach quality STEM, I probably have to just start with the fact that we have a fierce and fearless STEAM teacher cohort. And the biggest approach that we're working on right now is transcurricular integration. Quality STEM is about solving problems and answering questions, not in science, technology, engineering, math, but in life and understanding our real world. And when we do that, when we solve these problems, when we answer these questions, we don't think, oh gosh, was this from literacy? Was this a math problem? Answering these problems and solving these questions requires a multidisciplinary approach. So when we teach these subjects, We really need to help students understand that these are the tools that we use in order to move forward. So one thing that we often talk about is the fact that if you think about the standards, they're different than actually experiencing the STEM in and of itself. The difference is just like driving, right? When we learn how to drive, there's the manual and then there's being in the car. Unfortunately, when you're teaching out of standards, did I hit this one? Did I hit this one? Did I hit this one? You're teaching the driver's manual. But then when that student graduates, they're going to kill somebody because they've never been behind the wheel. So when we say, what does quality STEM look like? I would like to say, just like what Renee is saying right here, it's about teaching kids to drive the car. It's about getting kids to practice and master the 21st century skills, which are, by the way, in every single subject. So if you're having kids practice communication, how do they practice it in ELA? How do they practice it in art? How do they practice it in social studies? How do they practice it in science? You want to be able to bring STEM into all of your other subjects. Do it through the 21st century skills. Think about your lessons as, what opportunities do I have today to have my kids practice critical thinking? If you go from a skills-based approach, your kids are always driving behind the car.
I love that analogy. Oh, Chanel, go ahead.
I love it, Dr. M. Something you said made me think of one more thing that we need to add that we're probably doing separate, and that's social emotional learning. Oftentimes in STEM, we talk about solve a problem, but are you aware? Do you have social awareness? I can't just go in someone's community and say, hey, I see a problem and I'm going to fix it. No. Do you have social awareness? Do you know this community? Do you have self-awareness, self-management, and even responsible decision-making? I'm going to build this roller coaster using these materials, and this is how much time that I have. And thinking about relationship skills, you're always going to have that person in the group who's just going to dominate. But you're not giving your team members a time to talk, or you're not giving your team members a time to try it out and work. So how are we working with those skills in STEM as well? And I think that's another thing that we're keeping separate. And you can't do STEM, you can't make positive impacts in the world if you're not even aware of the people in your world.
Chanel, you're giving me chills.
You're so silly, Carrie.
All right. So I loved listening to everybody's answers to that. I don't even know that I could add a ton more, except to just say I keep hearing the common themes coming out about solving the problem, putting the kids in the driver's seat, thinking about how we want them to think and how we want them to learn to think. And I know Renee touched on the failure, being okay, like understanding failure as a part of the learning process, knowing how to bounce back from that, which they only know how to do when they get the practice to do it. And so much of school is about not making mistakes and about achievement and getting the final product the way that you want it. And this is why I love STEM so much, because it's so built into the engineering design process.
And I think with COVID happening and all of the things that happened with our kiddos and them coming back and trying to problem solve, it's so critical right now that we reteach the importance of like pushing through and stamina and being able to walk in someone else's shoes and all of that. I mean, it all comes together. And so, it was hard that question was hard for me, because when you have something that takes weeks and weeks, that's something I would definitely look at and reflect on and say, I'm not quite sure if that's how I would want to go about teaching STEM, because like you said, Dr. Ann, it's about us being able to see that it's not just about the project or challenge itself. It's about how we get there and what happens as an outcome of doing that activity. It's not just about, wow, look at, I made a spaghetti tower. We all have made spaghetti towers, but there's a reason why we do those things. There's an outcome and there's a definite reason. And whether it hits a standard, that's awesome. But there's a reason why we're doing those things.
So and I wanted, go ahead.
Just to piggyback a little bit on that, when it comes to these big projects too, when we first teach kids to drive, I'm going to go through this ordeal again with my youngest soon. You don't put them on the highway first. You put them in the parking lot. You let them make those mistakes. You let them make those small tweaks. So if it's a STEM project that's really big and you only have 15 minutes, maybe all they work on that day is one skill, you know, one drawing, one model, one little thing that adds to the whole thing, right? And if they can do that, if you can give them that little practice, because it's all about practice. You can't cheat the time. If you give them that little practice, you're going to help them in the long run.
All right, so this leads into the next question. I think it's really important when, no matter what we're doing, but particularly when we are feeling a time crunch, as our teachers who are doing 30-minute lessons or 45-minute lessons are doing. I think one of the things that is most important to do is to take a step back and ask yourself, as we've just did, what does quality STEM mean? What am I trying to accomplish? And our answers were, there was overlap, but there were some differences, right? And your why for why you're doing it might be different at different points in the year. And it might be about the standards that you need to cover. It might be about, you know, making them aware of STEM careers that are possible. It might just be about making them fully fledged adults who know how to think when they become adults, which is kind of like my underlying goal for everything. But if you know what your goal is, that makes it easier to go into the planning process. And I want to give us some practical ideas for how we could use 30 minutes. We're just going to use that as the baseline, because when I hear 30 minutes, I get like danger, because I think it's hard to do quality STEM in 30 minutes. But if I think about what my goals are, like you just said, Dr. Yen, you started to touch on it. There are some skills, there are some challenges we can do, but what we want to be careful of doing is not just saying like, I have 30 minutes, let me search quick, simple STEM online and see what comes back, because what comes back might be spaghetti towers without much substance behind it. And most of these things do have the ability for you to make the adjustments to like take you could do a spaghetti tower and have great things happen with thought and planning. So 30 minutes. I'm going to start on this one. Oh, I lost track of who I've started with. I'm going to start with Renee. Renee, if you had 30 minutes.
I did. That's what I.
Tell us what that looked like in your classroom. And then we'll all just start afterward, kind of throwing in some tips for some types of things we might do with that shorter period of time. So Renee, you go first.
Sure. So our primaries typically were 30 minutes, intermediates, hour. So ultimately, first off, you have to have management skills, because you are going to utilize every single minute. So when they come in, they better know where to sit down. They better know where to get their supplies. They better know how to listen. You better have your supplies ready to go. And that's why I was doing buckets. But I start off with the littles, a picture book. We talk a little bit about, what our outcome is going to be. I provide them with a very quick, these are the supplies you can use. And then at the end, we do a walkabout where we share and are able to connect to what the outcome was supposed to be. We also have to make sure that when you have 30 minutes, those kiddos, especially like I have new kids again, and they have to be retrained or taught how to actually do these types of activities because they're not used to it. I have to make sure that you need to front load students, especially if it's new to them, how to actually deal with when something doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to. And what I don't have it yet. We do a lot of yets. And we also make sure that what would happen if you had more time. Those are things that we preface at the end, because kids want to be able to have more time and they need to know. I use a timer for the last 5 minutes so they know it's time to clean up. And it helps me make sure we have transition back out of the classroom because the next group is coming in. So it's all about time management and making sure you have all of your supplies right there and ready to go. You cannot spend 3 minutes finding a book or finding a sheet or finding a supply. It has to go right away.
So Renee, let me just ask, do you do a brand new activity every time they come to see you?
Half an hour I was having an hour, every half an hour to hour, because it just depended what grade level I had coming in. I literally had 20, they left, the next group came in, they left, the next group came in, and there was 0 time between classes. So I had everything laid out, every spot in my room had a grade level as to what supplies went with what. And so I would just pick up a bucket and go, and I would just one after the other, or I stacked buckets to make sure that it was organized and I knew exactly where. And then I had to go to the next school, so I'd have to put them in big gigantic tub, and I'd have to wheel it to the next school the next day, and then wheel it back to the next school and back and forth. So yeah, I got really good at it. I got some really good muscles of, but it's all about management. So.
All right. Thank you. Those are some great ideas. I can't even imagine having to also switch schools. It had me thinking when you were talking about that it would be very difficult in that situation to go through the entire design process, like with rebuilds. Right. Were you able to ever do multiple iterations?
I actually had, I had shelving in my classroom where I was able to have a like section for each grade level and a spot. We had lots of trays. You can get lunch trays. You can get, like we used, you can get, like you said, Dr. Yan, you can go to places and you can ask for donations. I was able to get a whole bunch of trays from a restaurant. And we were able to just put things on with the labels on. If they were working on a team, they would put their name on it and I would put it on the shelf. And we would have it that way saved for the next week. But oftentimes we just try to make sure that we were able to get done and cleaned up. I was really good at time management.
You must have been. You must have been to survive that for so many years. It's amazing. Yeah. Claire, I know you've worked with small time periods before. You have any tips?
Yeah, I'm still kind of stressed out from what Renee went through. That's overwhelming. I think you touched on so many things that were like gold nuggets that you had in there that I would love to expound upon. I think one of the biggest things is having that reflection time. Like you cannot skip that. And that is so hard when you have such short time to complete the engineering design process. And then make sure you have that reflection. And what you said, like really quickly in there that has like so much depth, especially for me, is doing the walkabouts. And that's something that if you don't even get through the end of the design process, or maybe you're even going to continue it the next class period, but that's going to be in a week, you're probably going to forget everything you just went through. So I always tell everybody, freeze, you're going to have more time. So don't freak out on me right now, but you're going to have right now, I want you to go walk around and see all of the different designs from the other teams and come back to your seat. And then I want you to write down what is something that you're doing well. And then what is something that your team can improve upon that maybe you saw from the other teams. And so squeezing in reflection, not just at the end of a challenge, but every time that you're together. So they're really gaining what you want them to gain from that class period.
So I'll add to how I'm able to do that real quickly as well. We use Seesaw and Flipgrid depending upon the school, but Seesaw, if they don't have time to write, let them video what they have to say, take a picture so they know what it looks like. I also do a turn and talk in the line. I'll even say, turn and talk to a friend and tell them what, one strength that you had or one thing that you wish you could modify. Just turn and talks, go around the circle and share in the circle. I mean, those are quick things, but you're right. We never not reflect because that's really important for them to put their brain around what they just did.
That's so important. It's one of the things when I first started doing STEM challenges that I didn't do well. And when I started doing it, because I would just do almost the same thing as with science experiments as well, where, you actually do the experiment and then all of the actually analysis that you do at the end of it, you run out of class time because the experiment took so long and you're like, oh, well, we'll do it. We'll finish tomorrow or we'll do this thing. And you don't always go back to it. And I just want to be upfront about that because I have like deep teacher guilt about that, about not doing it well for so many years. And I just want to put that out there that if anybody's listening and thinking, oh my gosh, we always just stop after the build and we don't do the reflection piece. Most of us have been there. Most of us started that way. And we think that all of the beautiful stuff that happens in a STEM challenge or STEM activity happens in the build. And the reality is it's not. That deep reflection piece, like the kids need the time and the space to think and process and talk things through. And when you get to the point where you start making more time for that, that's when the understanding starts to, and the learning starts to grow. And so making sure that you make time for that, even if you can't do it in that same period. I love those ideas of using Seesaw or Flipgrid or taking pictures or whatever you can do to remember so that the next week when you come back, you have more time to discuss. And one of the things also that I would say, one of my goals when I am doing the STEM challenges is I want kids to not only pay attention to what they're doing, as Claire said, and as Renee both said, what else, what did you see in other designs and all of that? I want them to get used to really noticing other people's work and what they see and what patterns they notice. And so I would also recommend, if you have 30-minute class periods, don't feel like you need to be building something every single time. Slow down. One of the analogies I use a lot with like the way I used to teach is like I would take a bite out of an apple and throw it down and take a bite out of the next apple instead of like getting all the value from the one thing I'm doing. Like slow down, because it's going to make it more sustainable for you too. So one of the things I might do in that situation, if I had an elective class, is I might leave the designs out from a class that just left and really focus on, let's look at these designs. Let's ask questions. How many questions can you come up with for the designers? And then I might the next week ask the designers those questions, give myself a little bit of space and time to like breathe around getting all the materials and the chaos. And then also now you've got your classes communicating with each other and like people are looking at their work and being curious. I want them to learn to be curious, I think is the long-winded way of like what I was trying to get to. I want them to learn to be curious and learn how to ask questions about what they're seeing in the world around them. And you can take a 30 minutes and really dive deep into practicing that. You're going to hear crickets at the beginning because they're not used to it. Don't give up on it. It can be the most valuable, amazing thing that you do. There can be this communication back and forth. I'll stop there. Yen or Chanel, do either of you have some ideas? Chanel, go for it. You have some tips.
I wanted to kind of respond to what you said about STEM doesn't always have to be, the class doesn't always have to be a time we're building. And it kind of brought me back to a STEM unit that I wrote for teachers in my district, where we were working with Kane's Academy. Are you all familiar with Kane's Academy? Kane's Arcade. So basically he makes, it's really cool. So Kane's Arcade, he basically builds arcade games out of cardboard. And I did it from a lens of pushes and pulls. So I wrote it for second grade. This is how we're going to get in our force and motion. You're going to actually apply these skills and make your own arcade. You're going to build your own games, right? But I spent that first week, what skills in math do we need? We're going to probably need some measurement. We're going to need some skip counting because you got to take points, right? How am I going to determine a winner? We have to be able to compare numbers. How do I know who won? So taking those skills in math that the teacher is already doing and bringing that into my class, right? We're going to need pushes and pulls. So that first week, we're actually building the skills that you're going to need. Then we're making a blueprint. We're looking at a blueprint and I'm wanting to see, can I apply those STEM skills? Do I see this in your blueprint? Before you build anything, I need to see your plans and go ahead and get feedback from your peers. Let them see what you've done and see if they can give you any suggestions to improve, because you want your competitor to be at their best, right? So by the time we get to build, we're already in 3-4 weeks in, but at the same time, we know the goal. We're going to build a game for our arcade, and the best rated game is the one that's going to make it to field day, which isn't until the spring. So I say that to say I agree with you 100%. Every day, you don't have to come in. We don't have to build. That doesn't make you a failure. Not at all. You're building skills to a bigger purpose, and that is okay.
And actually, I can totally piggyback on that. I warned everybody I was a learning theorist. I'm a learning theorist. And what this means is learning takes time. So no matter what you do as a teacher, no matter what, if you don't give your students the time to learn it, they're not going to learn it. Think about your own learning, right? When you go to STEMCon and these places where there's all this information, there are moments where you soak it in and then you have to go for a bit and just let it breathe and cook, right? It's the same with the kids. If you're rushing from one thing to the other, the kids aren't learning. I'm going to repeat that. The kids aren't learning. So it doesn't matter about the standards. It's about your kids. So you have to build in that time for them to reflect. I teach the learning trajectory where the last 3 steps, synthesis, evaluation, and reflection, is where the sweet spot is for kids to make meaning. I should say recontextualization, where they make meaning. In other words, if you give them opportunities to take what they've learned and then translate it into another medium or modality, like, I don't know, let's take the water cycle and challenge your kids to make an interpretive dance about it, they're going to learn it a lot better than if they just copied the water cycle or if they just parroted it back, right? See, Renee's like, she's got it, right? But in other words, like another thing that you can do is when kids are reflecting, that reflection doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be boring. You can challenge your kids to do that reflection, and that recontextualization is what I call it. They can do it in mediums that are comfortable to them. And this actually brings in the culturally responsive piece that, you know, both Carrie and Chanel talked about, is when you let kids express their learning in the ways that they are passionate about, you not only get motivation, but they're going to blow you away with what they know and with their creativity. And that's the thing. A lot of times I hear people say, I want creativity in my classroom. Great. Did you ask for it? What did you ask your kids to create? Oh, they all look the same. That's not creativity, right? Creative means every kid's design should look different. Well, if you're not asking for it, you're not going to get it. So yes, you may have a half hour, but the thing is, there's so much you can do within that half hour. That doesn't mean you're the sage on stage expecting them to build. Give them time to just quietly cook that information, and give them time and opportunity for them to show you what they've learned.
I have to say the water cycle interpretive dance moment is one of my favorite panel moments ever. Thank you.
I actually have a song that would go with it, but I'm not going to sing it. Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank
actually
Chanel and Renee
a song with it. So
for joining in. Okay, so I'm conscious we have like 8 minutes left, but I'm gonna try to squeeze one more question in before my final one, which y'all have experienced before. I'm going to pull it in, and I'm going to ask everybody to weigh in, but kind of like in a short, like a lightning round kind of version of this. So what kinds of questions might you use during that reflection piece to promote higher order thinking? I will start with Chanel.
If you're not using your cross-cutting concepts, please use them, because that is going to promote higher order thinking. What type of patterns did we notice? Why do you think this happened?
Love it. All right, Claire.
So I would actually kind of throw something in there too, is that you also want to ask those kind of questions at the beginning instead of just like giving them, oh, here's the problem that you're going to solve. Like help them actually figure out that problem. And there's actually a list. I'm going to throw out a resource so people can have a full list of questions that they can use. There's a list by the CIA called the Phoenix list, and it gives a whole list of questions about how to approach problem solving. And it's also a way that you can look after you're reflecting and look back on those questions and kind of rephrase them in a different way. So Google the Phoenix CIA list.
Yes. And Claire, also afterwards, I'm going to ask you about that blog post that has the scope and sequence that you mentioned at the beginning. I want to make sure that that gets linked in the description for everybody to check out as well. All right, Renee, higher order thinking questions. What would you say?
I would say, we always go back to Bloom's taxonomy and DOK, depth of knowledge. So if you are not quite sure, definitely Google those two things, and you can go to those higher level, STEM starters, those questions that you can go with. That's a good place to start if you're not quite sure. And like you said, Claire, I've seen that one. That's pretty cool too. It's like, I agree. Start at the beginning and use those. And Chanel, I'm sure, you talk a lot about NGSS and the whole cross-cutting. If you think about the whole idea of phenomena and the whole idea of starting with like this big question, underlying question, that's a great way to get them thinking, because then their brain is thinking at different levels. And if you're working as a team, everybody's got a different thing that they're coming in with. So using those questions, like Claire said at the beginning, is very effective as well. So, check out some of those sites to help you understand what kind of questions you should be asking to begin with. And again, starting with phenomena is great.
Awesome. Dr. Yen.
So I would also say, in terms of reflection, I wouldn't necessarily say this is a question, but more like an additional challenge to give your kids, which is create something that teaches other people what you've just learned.
Love that. All right. I will just weigh in really quickly. One thing that when I started asking questions during the reflection piece, like after we would do the walkabout, I called a silent gallery walk because I didn't let them talk while they were observing, but then afterwards we would. And as we would go around and do the group discussions, sometimes after that piece, and I would start asking some of these questions like, well, what did you, what patterns did you see? And what do you think were strengths in yours or whatever? But when I would notice that sometimes at the beginning of the year, the students would be not sure how to respond. And one of the things that I found would help is if I directed their eye to a certain area of the designs. So if it was a tower, for example, and I would say, just look, let's everybody look at the base of each tower. Let's just look at where the tower connects to the desk. Let's look at each one. Now that you've kind of narrowed it down, they know what they're supposed to be looking at. And then eventually over time, you don't even need to really narrow so much most of the time, but that can help. If you're getting crickets in response to your questions, try to help direct them to just one single piece or one single area that you can look at in a design. Okay.
Carrie, just one more thing, because this is a really good source. Somebody in our Rebels group actually shared this. Scamper, SCAMPER. Oh my gosh. What can you substitute? What can you, it's all these questions that you ask kids when they're thinking about redesigning their engineering stuff. And it's pretty cool, actually. So
beautiful. Okay. All right. Last round, if you guys don't mind, can you guys have a couple extra minutes if we do my standard? Okay. So I always like to end every single panel with, is there a question you wish would have been asked or just a closing thought that you would like to leave us with? And I will start this round with Renee.
All right. We haven't talked a lot about supplies, when you talk about the idea that, there's been a lot of theory and a lot of, of the time management component. But if I were to look at supplies and where you can get them cheap, go to your recycle bins, breakfast programs, cans, you take the lids off, toilet paper tubes, egg cartons, like I said, cardboard boxes. People are always willing to, borrow out maybe letters or yarn, or your FIA department will have different things that they would let you borrow. Art programs sometimes will let you borrow some things out. Look for different ways to, borrow, like I'm getting some books from another school, are there friends that you have that you can borrow back and forth, different supplies? The science, like for the science program, I had to kind of give up my room with all of my awesome supplies. I have lots of friends that teach science, and hey, I remember you had these wheels. Would I be able to borrow them for a week? It's a matter of just trying to find those pieces that'll allow you to do something, for a given challenge that you don't even have to buy. So,
love it, Claire.
So, I'm trying to reflect on all the things that we've talked about because it's been so much. So one thing that I know would save time or saves me time is I have a lot of kids that come in my classroom and they want to ask questions about science stuff or something they've experienced that they're curious about. And I never want to stifle that. I mean, that's the teacher's heart, is being like, oh, you're thinking through things, but I know we have a lot to do. So what I started doing last year is I have what I call it a brain building box, and it's a box that's outside my classroom and it has a slot on the top. And I encourage my kids, even if we're in class and they have a question or something they want to talk about, I'm like, ooh, write it down right now while it's in your head and put it in that box. And I know we don't have time right now, but I will get to it and I'll get back to you. And that also helps me know that next class period, there might have been 5 kids that ask the same kind of question, like, I don't understand how this works. I'm like, oh, y'all didn't get this. And I want to make sure that I address this. So just giving them an outlet of being able to stay curious, even if it's about random things that they're experiencing at home or outside the classroom.
Love it. Dr. Yen.
So I think going back to saving time and money, I don't think as teachers we reach out and leverage our community resources as much as we can. It is amazing. Even reaching out to your local libraries, there tends to be, check out STEM kits that you can have. Universities have, lots of equipment that they also put into funds and kits for students to use. It's just a matter of even creating an email form letter that explains a little bit about your class and just randomly sending these out to different folks. But I think it's an important part of practice as a teacher to have your own supportive community of professional experts. Really, you can even ask them to be on an advisory board to help you out with planning some of these things. But having these communities to help support the work you do takes some of the stress and the pressure off of your shoulders, especially if you don't have to pay for it out of your own pocket.
Great points. Chanel?
I think one point we probably didn't get a chance to discuss when it comes to the limited time is expanding class from face-to-face. Utilizing your tech tools such as Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, and Canvas to encourage ongoing collaboration with your with students and their teams, that we can still build our blueprints, we can still reflect, have metacognition inside of our learning management system. So I think that's something that we probably didn't touch on. And one other thing, I don't really want to open this can of worms, but I'm going to, is how do we have quality STEM in a virtual environment, or roomy and zoomy, as we call it, some that are there and some that are online? What does that look like? And I don't think we had a chance to really talk about that.
We didn't. That could be its own panel, I feel like. It is a can of worms. I have to think about how to handle that.
COVID case, you're like in your class, and I pull the mask, or my mask is back on. You're in our city right now, we don't have to wear a mask at school, and I'm like, whoop, and I have tape around my desk. Now they're all sick and coughing, and whatever is out there is coming. So
yeah,
we
didn't talk about that,
don't we?
Okay, I need to think about how to. Okay, I'm gonna put that on the shelf for a few minutes, and think about if there's a way to address it before the end of Fall STEM Extravaganza, because I think you make some excellent points about that. I think I would like to also just weigh in and just say, one of the things that I would say is, if you only have 30 minutes, and you see your kids like once a week or whatever, the first thing I would say is, if it's possible, and it probably won't be this year, but maybe next year when the schedules are being built, if it's possible to talk to the powers that be who set this schedule and just ask, is it possible to do it so that at least it's 30 minutes 2 days in a row, and they're on that kind of a schedule, so that there's a little bit, it makes continuity easier than having to wait a whole week. And also to maybe talk about expressing to your principal or whoever it is, asking or explaining to them that 30 minutes is not possible to get through the entire, well, it's possible, but there are a lot of limitations. I was going to say it's not possible to get all the way through the engineering design process, but it's pretty near impossible. One of the things that has helped when I'm explaining it to somebody else who isn't into STEM is I liken it to the writing process. And some of you have heard me say this before. A quick STEM challenge is like a quick write. And if you only ever give your kids quick writes, but you never take them through the entire writing process, they're not going to develop into the quality writers, right? They will get faster at writing, but they're not going to get everything they need. And so sometimes when principals hear that, they understand it a little bit better, and there might be more flexibility than you think exists. There might not be, but it's worth a shot, right? And then finally, I will just say, everybody slow down, be kind to yourself, take a breath. Your kids need it too. So do some of these activities in a slower way. If you need to do them in that way, choose things that go and develop the things that you have decided make quality STEM. If you want your kids to be good thinkers, what are some other activities you can pull in to make them good thinkers that aren't necessarily a STEM challenge or build a roller coaster or whatever it is, right? And I think it's easier to be creative about that for me when I stop railing against or resisting the fact that I don't think good STEM happens in 30 minutes. And it makes me so angry if I only get 30 minutes. I could get like frustrated and upset, and that's not a good place to create from, or to allow my mind to be flexible and creative enough to think, what can I do with that time? So you have a lot of great resources in the people who are here today. And even beyond that, of course, at Fall STEM Extravaganza. We'll try to make sure we get all the links that you might need. I know we didn't hit every single question, and I know Chanel just gave me another idea for a panel that I didn't have planned, and I'm not sure if we're going to make it work, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. You had so many great ideas and totally inspired me. Thank you so much. And I'm going to end this broadcast here, but you can hang out for a second backstage with me. Bye for now, everybody.